Hello and welcome to the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things transportation, anything that gets you from here to there. I am the traffic anchor and the transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber, and if you would like to be a part of the show, you sure can. You can always give me a call on the listener hotline at 303-832-0217. I have all my contact information in the description of the show, and if you wouldn't mind rating the show, I sure would appreciate that as well. Well, we've talked a lot on this show about electric vehicles and where they will go in the future, but one online publication has gone even a step farther. The site inFocus.com has come out with their 12 EV predictions for 2024. So I wanted to know what these 12 predictions are for the new year. So I invited Peter Ramsay, the co-founder and editor-in-chief for EV inFocus, to be here on the show. Peter boasts 20-plus years experience in energy, commodity journalism, and analysis. He joins me now from London, England. Peter, thanks so much for being here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jason. Really appreciate it.
All right, so whenever I get a chance to speak to somebody in a different country, I always like to ask about the driving conditions there and what it's like to drive there. So how is driving and commuting there in London?
London is not a driving city. I think it's fair to say. There is, on the positive side, we have a very good, as long as it works, public transport system, and that is a lot quicker way of getting around than car use. So most people who live in sort of relatively central London don't do a heck of a lot of driving. To be fair, we tend to use our cars more for when we're leaving London, visiting family, vacations, etc. But yeah, I mean our family car, I have to confess, it sits on the road outside our house a lot more than it goes anywhere else.
Well, is part of that the congestion pricing, the taxing that goes on if you drive into central London?
I mean, yeah, that is an issue, and particularly with the if you were unfortunate enough to have an older car that has been captured by these very punitive charges. So that is a factor. Yeah, I think generally, there is there's nuances to it, but it's not a particularly politically car-friendly city, shall we say?
Right. You describe EV inFocus as the gold standard in business coverage for e-mobility. And in the past, you've worked for British Petroleum. You've also written for Petroleum Economist. So why did you switch from gas to cover now electric vehicles?
I had 20 great years writing about and analyzing the oil and gas sector. It was a very interesting sector, very dynamic sector. I just sort of feel the next 20 years, which is probably, hopefully when I'll be getting towards retirement age, that market demand for that product has, either peaked or is very close to peaking and will. My personal view is it will plateau for probably longer than some people think, but then I think it will go into decline at sometime in the 2030s, and so simply I wanted to write about something where I think there is more growth. I think we could argue all day. We could spend all the time that we have together, batting back and forth exactly what the growth rates for BEVs or for plug-in hybrids, mild hybrids, etc. looks like. But I think everyone would agree that they will go up over time. It's I think the debate is over how quickly.
Yeah. Do you drive an EV?
Not at the moment. We are in the process of changing our car, so we will be moving over. We do have a challenge in that we do not have off-street parking, which is an issue. We are hoping there's some quite innovative firms in the UK looking at ways to solve that. Ability to sort of provide a sort of a safely covered pavement gully, if you like, that would allow you to run a cable to your car without disturbing the pavement usage. We're kind of hoping that might become a thing over the next few years. But we will be hit. When we move over, we will be hit by a very strange thing that the UK has, where you pay a much lower tax rate for the electricity you use in your house compared to the electricity that you put into an EV if you charge it on a public charger. So we will be hit by that, which is an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big issue for a lot of folks who rent or who live in an apartment, especially here in the United States, where you're not going to live in the 5th floor building and then running an extension cord from your apartment down to the street. You just can't do that,
No. And I mean, clearly, fully battery electric adoption will be easier and much more economic for you if you do have that driveway, that off street parking. I guess I'm not as you rightly say, I'm not an American, so I don't I don't know exactly the logistics. I mean, obviously, if there is a parking garage at your building, hopefully we will see sort of the installation of charging infrastructure there, but that obviously involves some sort of landlords and tenants agreeing, which could be tricky. But obviously, if you are in a building and that and there isn't a parking garage, it will be an issue, and it will be harder for you to adopt. No question about that, and sort of improving both the availability, the reliability, and the affordability of those sort of charging options for people who don't have the luxury of plugging it in overnight and forgetting about it and just turning up in the morning is going to be a thing, and it's going to be a big factor in the in the willingness to adopt.
Right. My guest is Peter Ramsay, is the editor-in-chief of EVinFocus.com, also the co-founder of EVinFocus.com, and you can find them online, of course, at EVinFocus.com. Before we go through your list of the top 12 predictions for EVs in 2024, why did you decide to come up with these predictions? What prompted you to come up with this list?
Well, I mean, we did want to, we write a lot of kind of corporate focused stuff, Tesla strategy, Rivian strategy, the strategy of the the Fords and the GMs who are trying to balance the existing very profitable ICE production with trying to get the building blocks in place for a BEV business. So we write a lot of stuff that is, shall we say, not going to necessarily appeal to the general reader. We kind of wanted to spark a bit of debate and maybe have a little bit more fun than we do with some of our articles. So it's a maybe slightly more light-hearted attempt to kind of get people going, well, yeah, I agree with this. I don't agree with that. And we have had quite a bit of that, which has been nice.
Good. Yeah. This next prediction, or this first one, it's really not on the list, but maybe it should be one of your predictions. It should maybe 0.5. It would be Tesla owners thinking twice about buying one in cold climates after having their cars towed to a place to charge them because of the extremely cold weather in the Midwest of the United States.
Yeah, I mean that's that. Yeah, nobody's going to be happy with that. Although I did see a statistic, I think it was earlier today, maybe yesterday, coming out of Norway, which said that of of the cars that had failed to start in Norway with this winter, only 17% of them were battery electric, and 83% of them were ICE cars that weren't turning over in the cold weather. So I think we definitely if I put myself in the category of a BEV true believer, I don't want to. I don't want to sit here and deny that there are issues with BEVs. I think that would be stupid, and I think it insults the intelligence of people who go, well, maybe I'm not ready yet, maybe I'm not totally convinced by these. I think if you say, well, no, you're a dinosaur. This is the future, and everything's perfect. That's actually not a particularly helpful contribution to the debate.
Yeah, and to let you know, I drive a Chevrolet Volt, which is an electric vehicle. It has it's mine. This is actually my second version. I've been driving it since 2013, so 11 years now. And it has a generator in the front, so hybrid kind of, but it's always on electric, but it has a generator to generate electricity, so it's a different kind of hybrid, if you will. So and on days like this when it's cold, I will lose about a third of the battery power.
Sure, that's actually hugely interesting. In that there's a company in China who are they're called a new energy vehicle maker. That's what sort of how China calls it. But they make they make at the moment they are launching a fully electric vehicle, I think in March. But at the moment they make entirely exactly these type of vehicles. They're called EREVs, extended range electric vehicles, and their sales are their growth in sales is massively outstripping some of the other sort of Chinese new startups that are making purely the battery electric vehicles. So it does seem as if there's some data coming out of China that these EREVs are actually proving very, very popular, and it's sort of slightly strange that, as you say, GM with the Volt, and I think BMW and I think Cadillac also had one of these as well, and they've moved away from them.
Yeah.
China's suggesting that actually maybe they should be thinking about moving back to them.
Well, and Ram here in the United States, Ram, I guess it's Stellantis, I think, makes Ram. They are now going to, in the next couple of years, do that with one of their trucks, do one of these.
Yes.
Same thing, battery powered, but they're going to have the generator so you can keep going and just fill it up with gas. It really takes away that range anxiety, so you never have to worry about it, but you're still going, and the maintenance on it is the same as an EV. And I have to get an oil change once every 9 or 12 months. So the maintenance on the generator is so much different and so much easier than it is in a regular ICE car.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it'll be interesting to see if a few more of the Western OEMs go down that route. Yeah. It's not a prediction for but I think there's something in that.
Right. My guest is Peter Ramsay. He's the co-founder and editor-in-chief of inFocus.com. We're talking about their 12 predictions of EVs for 2024. So let's get into the predictions. Let's get into the first one on the list is a jump in U.S. EV adoption in some places.
Yeah, and I think that in some places is pretty important, right? I think there are places in 2024, and obviously, again, bear in mind, I'm not American. I'm looking at this as an outside observer. But, clearly, there are places that are not going to see significant increases, and then there are, I think, places that will, obviously, you guys have an election coming up at the end of the year. It does feel, again, as an outsider, that that sort of EVs are kind of being dragged slightly into some of this culture war stuff, and may well increasingly be so. I think when the UAW strike was going on, I think Donald Trump did do some posts on his social network, sort of suggesting that that U.S. car makers shouldn't make any electric vehicles, or they'd just be basically surrendering their future to China. So there is clearly going to be some places, I think, in the US that are not so fertile, but some of the states that maybe lean more to the left. I think we will see, particularly if we see more of the models that have at least temporarily lost their sort of subsidies, get them back, because that's obviously a bit of an issue at the moment. But when they get those subsidies back, that subsidy will be able to be applied at the point of sale from the start of this year, as opposed to you having to claim it back in your tax return, 6 months later or 18 months later. So that will be a quite a good driver for US adoption in these areas that where there is appetite.
Right. Yeah, that's what I had to do. I had to wait till my tax return and then apply for the federal and then separately the state tax return. And that was really, it was $11,000 for me between the federal and state. So it really made the car affordable for me at that time. The second prediction on your list is Tesla to feel more Cybertruck pain. Have you seen one there in London? Have you driven one yet?
No. I think that I think the Cybertruck is just the sheer size of it. It's going to be a very tough sell in Europe as a whole. I think it's a striking vehicle. You cannot take that away from it. Whether you like it or whether you don't like it. I mean, our general feeling is that sort of the US automakers have kind of slightly oversimplified their sort of belief in what EVs they should be making. They've kind of gone, Americans love buying trucks, so let's all make electric pickups, and then people will love buying them. When there was a survey out sort of in December which suggested that actually the Americans who currently buy ICE sort of pickups are like the least open buying segment in the whole US market to electrification. Yeah. Which sort of makes, if you're GM and you've got 3 of these trucks, Ford's obviously got the F-150, Tesla, Rivian, you could actually be competing for a much shallower demand pool than you really thought, because you just kind of assumed everyone wants to buy trucks and therefore we'll make all these pickups. And actually, maybe if you'd made a saloon or a sedan, I should say, or or a sort of city car runabout, actually maybe that would have been better. So maybe Tesla would have been better off making this Model 2 that it's talked about, the sort of affordable sort of the $20,000. Maybe they should have done that first, rather than doing Cybertruck. But at the same time, it's a very brave man that says in the EV space that Elon Musk's made a mistake, because he's got most things right so far, hasn't he?
Yeah, but not everybody's perfect all the time. And so we'll see.
No.
Yeah. And a lot of the people here that are buying regular ICE pickup trucks, they're still using them for work. They need it for the power to tow things. And so the electricity, the battery trucks are still not quite there yet, especially when it comes to range, towing, and losing any range with the added weight. And then it's just a different mentality for the folks that are the working guys who have these pickup trucks. It's easy for them to stop at the gas station, 10 minutes, they're filled up, they go get their drinks inside, and then off they go to the work site.
Yeah, I mean, for that use case, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that would be something, again, that there's no real point in arguing the BEV case at this moment. I think the Cybertruck is potentially more challenging than some of the other stuff that Tesla has launched.
Right. My guest is Peter Ramsay. He's the co-founder and editor-in-chief of inFocus.com. We're talking about the 12 EV predictions for 2024. Up next, number 3, someone will smash it on vehicle software. Explain what that means.
Well, I think one thing it seems pretty clear from initial reports is it's not going to be GM.
Yes, right.
Because the reports of late from their in car has not been good. I think this is part of a wider trend, which the auto industry is calling the software defined vehicle. So it's sort of around China has kind of transformed the driver experience, on the infotainment systems, on basically the idea almost of your car being your mobile phone on wheels, if you like, and we're saying that and then obviously there's the there's also the driving aids, the ADAS, etc. So we're saying is that somebody in the next year is going to really get that right, sort of outside of China, and that's really going to drive, that's going to drive some significant sales growth. Somebody's going to release a new, if you like, in-car platform that everyone's just going to go, oh wow, this is amazing. Yeah, maybe it's Volvo.
Yeah, and it would be nice to see software included forever in the car purchase. There was somebody trying to sell, I was reading recently, trying to sell their Tesla, but because they did not purchase the automatic or their autopilot system software, that the value of the vehicle was so much lower than if they did include it. So that software, even in my car that's 10 or 11 years old, it costs so much money because I would have to have the dealership install the software. There's no over-the-air updates for my car, and at $300 or whatever dollars an hour for the mechanic to do it, it's just not cost effective for me to update the software in the car.
Yeah, and it's just going to become such a big thing over the next number of years that the premium on getting it right and having customers happy with it is going to be huge.
Right. All right, your 4th prediction in EVs for 2024, a major OEM will hit the skids. As you just mentioned, is GM on the short list there?
I wouldn't have thought so, given that, its ability to sell, its legacy range in its home market is not going to be massively diminished for a number of years. So I think, they will be, they've got to get it right. They've got to position for, a decade down the road. But, I think they've got time. I think they've got, and Ford, I think, the same. Both of them have obviously taken quite a lot of stick for kind of, shall we say, retiming their investments. Inherently, it's actually, if you take a step back, those are pretty sensible decisions, right? The adoption curve has not been kind of as quick as the most optimistic sort of forecasts were. It's probably non-linear. It probably moves in kind of chunks of like the early adopters, the sort of early mass market. And I think we're probably at a plateau stage at the moment. So actually, for a Ford or a GM, just moving some of these timetables and investments back is not a bad idea in our view. I suspect, if I had to sort of be held to the fire around which one. I mean, Stellantis looks like a messy combination. Does Chrysler work with Peugeot, with with Citroen, who Peugeot and Citroen not exactly friends, historically, and with Fiat. I mean, it looks a little bit bloated and a little bit messy. I think though that probably it's one of the smaller Japanese ones that could be most most at risk. They've kind of been crushed in China, and then China's kind of expanding its exports regionally, both EVs and also ICE cars. So I think that the Japanese makers are going to come under pressure in sort of markets like Southeast Asia, where they've kind of owned those markets. And so it could be a sort of Mitsubishi or a Subaru that you could see sort of getting into some difficulties. I'm not saying, and we say in the piece that we're not saying one of them's going to go bankrupt in the next 12 months, but I think there's a few that you could say look vulnerable, or you could say look sort of in their current form like suboptimal.
Yeah, I wonder how the European automakers are doing compared to U.S. or China, because it seems like they're slowly doing their thing without a whole lot of fanfare. Mercedes and BMW and the like, they are coming out with their EVs, that it seems like they're just at a steady pace more than maybe here.
Yeah, well, I mean, BMW's sort of full year sales were interesting in that their EV sales year on year were up by sort of 75%. Still only 15% of overall sales, but actually if you sort of took the growth in their BEV sales out of their overall sort of sales, the stuff that they sold that was non-BEV actually went down very slightly. So actually all the annual growth that BMW recorded was in BEVs. So they're slowly getting there. The issue that sort of pretty much all the automakers have at the moment is that they are selling into premium markets, right? Everyone is selling relatively expensive EVs. And there's only so much growing you can do in that market, right? To really kind of unlock things, you need in Europe, you need to sort of be producing a sort of a 20 to 25,000 euro kind of kind of family city runabout kind of car, and there's a few of them coming this year. And the Renault 5, iconic car, is getting a fully electric Renault 5. There's a few others sort of on the horizon. So that'll be interesting, because I mean, if someone can crack that, there is there's a Dacia, which is probably not a brand that would be familiar to many of your listeners. It's a sort of a Romanian Romanian budget brand who does sell a sort of relatively cheap sort of EV, and it sells Dacia Spring. It's a subsidiary of Renault. It sells reasonably well, but it has a terrible sort of safety rating. It's not a it's not a car that that sort of fulfills both affordability and kind of shall we say full desirability on every criteria. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we do start to see these the e-Corsa and cars like that appearing for the mass market.
And speaking of the European situation, fifth on your list, there will be a landmark EU-US deal on e-mobility. What kind of a deal would be brokered here?
I mean, who knows? And this is why it's a kind of a prediction, if you like. But it kind of makes sense that both the EU and the US have kind of got the same issue, which is around around the potential threat, shall we say, of Chinese models coming into their markets and disrupting important domestic industries for employment and for the economy. It would make a lot of sense, in our view, if I'm not saying that you take away all tariffs, or but something where the two markets could be more easily kind of integrated, with stuff produced in one block going into the other block. Just simply creating that bigger market, and for a Ford or a GM, who one would like to think have got some pretty good lobbying positions. You'd think they probably have some influence on Capitol Hill. To be able to unlock the European market, maybe for their for their US made BEVs, could be pretty helpful.
Yeah, and tariffs, it just makes everything that you buy that has a tariff on it more expensive from either side, European side or the American side. So, if you want to sell more of them, well, you do away with the tariff, and the prices obviously will come down.
You'd hope so, yeah, right? Yeah, Economics 101. That's right. Hopefully.
Exactly. My guest is Peter Ramsay. He's the editor-in-chief and the co-founder of inFocus.com, talking about their 12 EV predictions for 2024. We're halfway through the list at number 6. There will be a breakthrough EV model that's not a Tesla.
Yeah, I think that probably we've probably touched on that a bit already. This is again, the kind of the key thing in terms of a volume EV for that sort of sub €30,000, sub $30,000, and I think that will happen this year.
The 7th prediction for EVs: China won't hit its targets in Europe. How are those Chinese EVs selling in Europe? I would think that Europe, as we talked about, some of those car makers there already have a whole bunch, and I would think the European community would rather buy their automakers rather than China.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in that, and one of the Chinese companies that has done most well has been SAIC, SAIC in the UK, but one of the reasons for that is really that it owns MG, the sort of the old British car maker. So it's been able to sell its cars in the UK under a brand that people know, and people go, oh yeah, MG, cool little sports cars from the 60s, right? Yeah. That seems to have really kind of been more successful. You could argue that Volvo and Polestar are Chinese EV makers, because they're owned by Geely. All of the products are basically on the Geely sort of SEA platform. So there's a lot of while they're both clearly Swedish in terms of corporate headquarters and the with Volvo, the whole legacy of being a Swedish manufacturer, but there's a lot of Chinese tech under that bonnet, but they have the advantage of being, again, European brands. We're not seeing huge uptake as yet of people going, oh yes, I'll buy a BYD, oh yes, I'll buy a Neo, oh yes, I'll buy a GWM. So there's definitely that resistance that you of the unfamiliarity. Clearly that is something that can be overcome. People didn't know the Japanese brands, I guess, when they arrived. The Korean brands when they arrived. But at the same time, there wasn't that sort of geopolitical element as well. We weren't in any sort of trade disputes with the largely in Europe with the Japanese or the South Koreans when they sort of turned up trying to sell cars. So I think there's going to be that political aspect to it as well. eroding that Chinese ability to compete. That said, the sort of the MG model or the Volvo model, what's to say that BYD might not, we've talked about Stellantis and it's kind of its sprawling nature. It's got a lot of kind of brands that, assuming that the European competition authorities didn't sort of step in. What's to stop BYD making an offer for Alfa Romeo or Lancia or something that is a familiar name, and then maybe that gives them a leg up. The other thing is obviously is that the Chinese haven't brought their cheapest models to Europe yet. To some extent, that's because their cheapest models may not meet safety standards, right, or may not meet sort of European expectations on aesthetics. I mean, some of these Chinese city cars, that they're selling for $8,000 and stuff, they look pretty weird. Like they they do not look like the sort of thing that you'd expect Western buyers to buy. At the same time, if they were able to bring them to Europe and sell them for less than €10,000, you might find that people would buy them.
Oh, I think people in the United States would buy them, but again, it's the safety aspects which puts more money into the car and to the research, and then I think people here would buy almost doesn't matter what it looks like. If it's under $10,000 and it meets our safety requirements and our emission requirements, boom, they would buy it.
Yeah, and I mean, why not? If that could make a significant,
Hey, if people were willing to buy a Yugo back in the 80s, I mean, come on, we'll buy anything.
yeah, not the prettiest car in the world.
Or safest, or, most reliable or whatever. I mean, but hey, it was a cheap car and people go, I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly.
And your eighth prediction on the list is a continuation of that seventh one, where China won't hit its targets in Europe, but will reshape Asian Pacific markets, maybe because they can sell more of their cheaper cars in those areas where they don't have the same standards as there are in the EU or the United States.
Yeah, and it's also just a distance thing as well, right? It's much sort of it's much quicker and cheaper for China to get its cars to Thailand or to Vietnam or to even to Australia than it is to get them all the way to Europe or to the US. So that's clearly a factor in it. I mean, it's already we're already seeing in the Australian figures, to the point we were talking about, Australians will buy, Chinese cars, even though, Australia and China don't exactly have the greatest sort of political relationship. There's tension there clearly. But, Australians are buying more and more Chinese cars because, as you say, they are affordable. Yeah. And, in Thailand, we're seeing, even Toyota, who are probably one of the least likely car companies to ever say that that BEVs are kind of making progress or kind of are something they should be seriously thinking about. They've sort of actually come out and said in Thailand, which is a key market for them, we're seeing sort of Chinese imports taking a big chunk of that market, and we're worried about it. So it's definitely already happening.
My guest is Peter Ramsay. He's the editor-in-chief and the co-founder of inFocus.com. You can obviously get him on inFocus.com, and we're talking about the 12 EV predictions for 2024. Number 9 on the list is that an unusual EV champion country will emerge. Is that Australia? Is that Vietnam? Is that somewhere else?
I mean, it could well be. I mean, I think the kind of if you like the stereotypical sort of idea is China first, then Europe, the US kind of lagging. Maybe some of those markets that are sort of close to China, kind of get the China effect, but the global South largely kind of sticks to ICE, and actually almost becomes like the place where as regulations tighten and maybe as consumer appetites change, that sort of becomes like the graveyard where people can continue selling sort of petrol and diesel cars long after sort of Europe no longer buys any of them, etc. But we're just sort of putting it out there that there might be places that that really kind of adopt quicker. I mean, particularly places that are able to roll out sort of electricity and that infrastructure. So places that if they build a lot of solar, actually suddenly it could become very cheap to charge up EVs, and very often these sorts of countries are don't have their own oil and gas resources, don't have their own refineries, import expensive gasoline and diesel to fuel their cars. So actually cheap domestically produced renewable electricity could sort of be like, actually we should get ourselves buying EVs. So that's a sort of slightly off the wall one.
Yeah, but there will be a lot of places in the world, Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, that aren't going to be there. It almost seems like they're never going to have the infrastructure for EV adoption, and they'll be driving their ICE cars and their Toyota pickup trucks forever.
I mean, that certainly, that certainly could, there is certainly a large school of thought that sees that playing out. Hydrogen is something which I don't believe in it for passenger cars. I think maybe for big heavy duty. But if you're producing a lot of hydrogen, if you're in a Southern African country and you're installing all this this massive solar array to produce hydrogen, you're going to be producing sort of super cheap electricity, and maybe adding a whole load of EV charge points as you go is actually sort of economically kind of smart if it basically cuts your gasoline and diesel import bill, and particularly if as a government you are subsidizing that those fuel sales to your people who can't actually afford to pay market rates for gas. I mean, that could become a sort of quite an economically interesting idea.
10th on your list of the 2024 EV predictions: hybrids will prove annoyingly sticky. Sticky how?
Well, I think what we mean there is that, and this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, we don't hate hybrids. We've already discussed how sort of EREVs could be actually quite a cool sort of trend. Inherently, mild hybrids are they're a halfway house. They're a short to medium term solution, but we think in 2024 they're probably going to grow quicker than BEVs. That's which is fine. As I said, there are genuine customer concerns around going all electric in many use cases that are valid. So it's not the end of the world. And also it's a first step, right? It's a nice for people who are interested and who kind of want to do the right thing by the planet, if you like, by not by reducing their sort of their personal carbon footprint. They kind of made that first step, and maybe then they can go on to fully electric once batteries and once charging infrastructure have developed further. So they're not in any way the end of the world. But I think it's sort of maybe slightly depressing for those of us who'd like to move faster. That you see these massive growth for hybrids.
My wife is one of those who would take a hybrid over a pure electric, because she's the kind of person that is still used to going to the gas station 5 minutes, and then that's all she has to do is think about fueling up once a week, not every night where you have to plug it in. And if you don't, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Is that we are asking people to sort of change a century of learned behavior, and you can't expect everyone to just kind of to just sort of go overnight, if you'll excuse the pun, I'm gonna but at the same time, if you flip it around the other way, if you said to somebody, oh, by the way, instead of just plugging your phone in by your bed every night, you've got to go somewhere and take it to this this mobile phone charging station once a week and pump it full of electrons there, and it's fine because you only have to do it once a week. They'd probably say, well, why can't I just charge it up overnight beside my bed by plugging it in like I normally do? This idea that I have to take it to this place once a week sounds kind of inconvenient and doesn't really suit my lifestyle. So it's a little bit facetious, but it's I guess just a point that what you're used to in one way isn't necessarily the way that you perceive it in a different way.
You almost have to get it to a point where you drive into a garage or on a street or whatever, and it's like that wireless charging where you just drive it over your vehicle over a little charging station, and then it charges it automatically, and then you just keep on going.
Yeah, I think we will see significant innovation in charging and in batteries, giving range, giving more range, for vehicles that need it, and less range and kind of more kind of affordability and for those that don't. We're still in the early days, so there's plenty of that to come. So that that's what makes it a fun kind of topic, I guess.
Right, and that's pretty much the 11th prediction, is that there's going to be consolidation in charging.
Yeah, this is particularly in Europe, we've got far too many companies doing it. The vehicle manufacturers kind of doing it. Weird. You don't go into a Mercedes petrol station. Why would you go into a Mercedes like charging station? You've got your BPs and your Shells and your Essos and your who kind of trying to future-proof their businesses. You've got electric utilities who are like, we sell electrons, and then you've kind of got these startup companies who are like, oh yeah, this is a good business to be in. So you kind of got these four different kind of types of companies all going at it. Clearly, yeah, in Europe, it's just led to massive fragmentation. People having, particularly people who live in continental Europe and who do a lot of kind of, business travel, maybe across borders. You're hearing horrendous stories about people having, 7 different cards and 9 different apps. It's ludicrous and doesn't help anyone. Yeah. In the US, clearly, out with Tesla, the charging experience has been frankly, woeful. Yep. In terms of maintenance, in terms of operability, etc. I suppose to some extent that's what happens if if Tesla's main competitor in this space was kind of made to do this because of like Dieselgate, doesn't necessarily really want to be in that business. I don't know. You'd have to speak to Volkswagen about that, but clearly what we need is some very competent big players, deep pockets, kind of long-term vision to come in and kind of produce sort of a good charging experience. We need more kind of companies of the scale of the big sort of fuel distributors, and less sort of people with 17 charging stations. It's just not going to work.
Well, and you need really to educate the people with EVs to use the charging stations as just I'm going to get a couple of minutes here on the charger so I can keep going 100 miles. Unless you're going cross country or long distances, there's no reason to fill it all the way up to the top when you're just out and about. You could spend 10, 15 minutes and get some charge and then keep going. You don't need to sit there for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very realistic way of looking at it. I think we have to accept that, just simply saying to people, range anxiety is not a thing. And, you very rarely do these, big trips isn't probably the right way to kind of win friends and influence people. But at the same time, to say, most of the time you'll be okay when you are doing these sort of big trips, these vacation trips, or you will have to plan a bit more. You will have to kind of consult your app and plan your journey a little bit more. But that is not, unless you're someone who sort of commercially drives long distances on a daily basis, is something that is that's going to impact you hugely. Yeah. But it will impact you a little bit.
Right. And your 12th and final top prediction for EVs in 2024, as I'm speaking with Peter Ramsay, the editor-in-chief and co-founder of inFocus.com, is that we will get a new word for the EV lexicon.
Yeah, I mean, this was a bit of a silly last one. I think I already know what 17 days into the year, I think I know what it should be.
Okay.
I think I know what it should be. So you've probably seen the thing about the Tesla recall, because of some of the issues with their ADAS autopilot. Right. Clearly for Tesla, recall doesn't mean you got to take you get an over-the-air update. So, recall is kind of, doesn't really work. So what about e-call?
Right. There you go. There was this one other story recently about the rental car Hertz. I'll just get your last comments on this, because they're selling off a large portion of their EV fleet because it's not necessarily that it's a problem with the EVs, but they're so expensive to insure and to repair. And I've heard similar issues with some potential buyers of Rivians, especially, and Teslas and other specialized EVs, that the cost to repair them it's almost as much to buy a new one as it is to get the one repaired.
Yeah, I mean, I believe, and again, I'm speaking as someone who's not in the US, but I believe that there is some disquiet about how long it takes to particularly the length of time it takes for Tesla to carry out these repairs, and particularly if you are a fleet operator. Where you need, you need that, the kind of availability. Repair time is downtime is costing you money. I think that is an issue, and someone raised the point that this could be a real problem for Tesla's Semi as well, because obviously if you are if you're buying, if you're a big Class 8. Truck fleet company, and you invest in significant numbers of Tesla semis, and they break, and Tesla can't fix them kind of yesterday, that's cargo that is sitting there untowed. So that's clearly something that Tesla need to get a handle on. I mean, I think the Hertz thing was was interesting. Clearly, Hertz did say, it's not about EVs so much as, there are certain things which happened here. Obviously, Tesla slashing the prices massively impacted the residuals. And, if you are a fleet business, that's going to hurt your bottom line, right? Because
Hertz takes those cars and sells them later and makes the money back. So.
Yeah. Yes, and obviously, if it doesn't, and even if it hasn't sold them yet, it probably has to write down the value of the inventory, and that's an accounting charge, right? That's gonna turn up. They did say one other interesting thing, which is that they, the actual maintenance costs were lower. But that they were getting more repair bills. Again, potentially higher repair bills, but more repair bills because of, and they kind of held their own hands up about this, of sort of lack of education of the drivers. Because I think a lot of people who were maybe renting Hertz, this was their first experience of driving a BEV, and basically they were just finding the acceleration different, and they were basically, crashing into stuff much more regularly than Hertz would normally expect. So actually, to some extent, it was a lack of education of driver problem as well. That they weren't used to driving what is a different ride, and they were basically shunting into other cars or into other objects because they kind of were like, they touched the accelerator and it jumped forward, and they weren't expecting it.
Yeah, that's what I tell people about driving in. You don't get this problem there in the UK that much, but driving in snow, it really is different with the immediate torque of an EV that you can be, and then your tires might be spinning, but because you don't have an engine to hear the engine revving like you do, you don't know that your tires are spinning. That so it's a whole way to different drive, especially in ice and snow.
Yeah, no, it's So but challenges, right? New technology. Right. This isn't a straightforward, easy journey.
Any next fun stories that you're working on?
We are. We're doing a bit of a few sort of white papers. One which might interest you guys is trying to work out if the California grid is going to be able to hold up to kind of going all electric. Our current conclusion, we haven't finished speaking to everyone yet, is definitely the way it currently is. If California went all EV, they couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
There would be. The feeling is, though, that there is enough investment sort of planned by the utilities to kind of keep up with the move. But the other issue is that grid's going to have to get a lot smarter.
Yeah. I think Texas is even worse because they have such problems with their own system when it's really hot or really cold, they have a hard time keeping up. So Texas is almost worse than California.
Yeah, probably isn't going to adopt EVs quite as quickly.
Sure.
But California is going to have obviously all these electric cars. Pretty much the vast majority of its new generation to meet that demand is going to be renewable. It's going to be not base load, not sort of predictable. So there's going to have to be a lot of sort of energy storage. Good for Tesla, potentially. There's going to have to be a lot of smart grid, and we are going to get to stuff like vehicle to grid, where you actually can kind of use your, say if you've got an F-150 Lightning, you've basically got a massive battery in your garage, which you can use to take power off the grid in the middle of the night when it's cheap, and then sell it back to the grid when demand is peaking, and you're particularly on maybe a cloudy day where there isn't much wind.
And if you don't need to go anywhere.
Yeah, it could be profitable. Yeah. I mean, particularly if if these things could be introduced into workplaces. If you think about big parking lots, that's could be just a sort of giant battery, right?
Well, they're actually up in Boulder here, just down the road from me. They're doing that. with one of the with some of they take their cars. The city charges them up at night, and then if they need power, they'll draw it back from the cars during the day.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the EV batteries at the end of their lives will probably end up in these. Will actually end up as sort of energy storage because they won't. Sort of 10 years. After 10 years, they won't be good enough batteries to power an EV, but they'll still be perfectly fine for sort of stationary energy storage for a good number of years after that. So we'll probably see a lot of that, a lot of scrappage of EV cars when that starts becoming a thing. Sort of 5-10 years, the battery's just basically being removed, maybe some defective cells kind of thrown away, and the rest just kind of repurposed to balance out sort of wind power and solar power.
Well, it's Peter, been a fascinating and fun conversation talking about your 12 EV predictions for 2024. People can see that right now at evinfocus.com. Thanks again for your time, your expertise, and it's been a wonderful conversation.
Jason, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I put a link to the article, the 12 predictions of EVs for 2024 from evinfocus.com in the description of this show. You just click that and it will take you right to the article. And I mentioned to Peter before the interview started that I was going to be flying to London before then flying on to Dublin for spring break for my daughters. I think I've said this on the show before. My daughters are competitive baton twirlers, and they've been invited, their baton group, to march in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Dublin, Ireland this year, this spring break, this March. And so I'll be flying from Denver to London, and then on from London to Dublin, and then we'll do the parade, and then we have another tour scheduled. We have to do it with this tour group. And this tour company, as part of the thing, this is the frustrating thing, is so you can't just show up and do the parade. You have to be as part of this tour group. And so as part of the tour group, it includes these bus transfers, and we have to go down after the parade. We have to get on these buses, and we're going to go down to southwestern Ireland, and we're going to go do the Ring of Kerry, and we were going to do the Cliffs of Moher, but we decided that's too far, so they have another tour around this other thing. But in other words, we have to do this whole package deal. We can't just go to the parade and then do our own thing. We have to do this package deal, and it costs so much money. It's crazy how much money this is going to cost me. But anyway, so I'll be in Dublin for spring break, so I can't wait to see, as Peter was describing, what the driving styles are like in London. Because when we go to Dublin, we'll be there for about a week or 5 days or so, and then we're going to go back to London for a couple of days before flying back to the United States and flying back home. So I just cannot wait to see what the driving is like, patterns like. I'm not going to be renting a car. That's going to be, to me, not frustrating, but I wish I was going to rent a car so I could really see what it's like. But anyway, either way, it's going to be... It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It'll be a blast, but it will also put me in the poorhouse for the rest of my life. Yay! All right. Anyway, if you need to contact me, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, all my contact links are in the description of the show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy. Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.